Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's wonderful to have you all here, and it's fantastic that we get to hear the news straight from the horse's mouth, as the saying goes. We have Eric Kalita in the mix, who will share his opinion on the revised PAX SDK, again, written and commented wonderfully by Eric himself. I know that Max has done extensive research into the revised PAX SDK. He will share some things, and everybody else who wants to, please just raise up your hands and go on. Eric, is there anything you want to share right out of the gate, or do you want to have Max set you up with some specific questions that I know have been brewing in Max's brain?
Sure. Maybe I'll just give like a preamble kind of ground leveling sort of set of statements. So, yeah, what we announced last week. Time I can't tell what time is anymore.
Last week, yes.
Last week, okay. Is a couple things. The first of all is an overall change to the company name. So what was previously called Grammarly is now called Superhuman. Superhuman was the name of another company that we had acquired that made a mail product. Their product is called Superhuman Mail now. Coda is still called Coda. Grammarly is still called Grammarly, but the company is Superhuman. So the product names have stayed the same, except for Superhuman, which had to do a little bit of deduping. But the company name is Superhuman. So that was like the one big change. And then the new product that we launched is called Superhuman Go. It is delivered via the Grammarly extension. So it's kind of thinking about what Grammarly could do before, which is follow you around on all the sites and apps where you work and provide you with assistance. It's taking that overall framework and allowing for a variety of agents to kind of travel on that superhighway, as Shahir likes to call it. So before there was just grammar correction agent that could follow you around. Now there's a dozen agents that can follow you around. And then what we're talking about here is that the way we decided to build those new agents is via PAX. So we did not create a brand new SDK for agents. We did not create a whole new way of building or hosting your code. Instead, we said, let's just take PAX, throw on a little bit extra because we kind of like need to describe a little bit of extra things for us to make a good agent. And then that's what an agent is. So if you go to Superhuman Go today, it is currently free to install, even on a free Grammarly plan, and you install the Google Calendar agent. That is the Google Calendar pack. It is not, there were some tweaks done to it, but it's not a whole new piece of code or infrastructure. It's just the calendar pack turned into the calendar agent. And so going forward, if you built an existing pack, you will have the option to kind of like do some tweaks and perhaps launch that as an agent. Or if you're coming in new with an idea for an agent, you would just use the familiar set of PAX tools and SDKs to build that agent. And then you'll have a choice about, do you also want it to show up as a Coda pack in the PAX gallery? There's a little bit of like decisions right now as we're like still working to unify all of these concepts, where your pack can be a pack, your pack can be an agent, it could be both, it could just be one or the other. So, but that's kind of like what we all launched last week. The docs, the technical documentation for how to build is live. We're working on adding more context around like the value pitch that I kind of like skipped over for the deadline, since that gets a lot of people have opinions about that. The technical docs, that's kind of like all in my court. And then for the moment, the developer experience for building and launching an agent is in a closed beta. So we worked with a small handful of partners for the initial launch. You'll see agents from Radical Candor, Quizlet, a couple other names you may recognize. But for the time being, we're kind of going slow with onboarding new partners and new agents into the ecosystem, since it's a lot of things are different, even though a lot is the same, but we're kind of going slow and taking our time. So you can read about how to do it, but you won't actually be able to build and test today since it's in a closed beta.
Wonderful. That sums it up so nicely. Thank you so much. I know I have some questions. I know Max has questions, but anybody else? Did any new questions come up? If so, now is your chance. Otherwise, I'm going to hand the mic over to Max.
Okay, I have sharing my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, so I have to say, Eric, hats off to the team. Absolutely brilliant piece of work. So just to give you guys the results of our analysis of the PAC SDK and how it works and what the big differences are, and I'm going to try and keep that down to just a few minutes. So essentially, you build a PAC. Here's an agent that's being built as a PAC, and when you go in, you get all the same things you do with building a PAC as you do with building an agent. You have a listing, you give it you give it an icon, you give it a description, and so on. And then when you go in and start messing with the code, it's the same TypeScript code we're used to, but there are some new things in there, like you have this thing called PAC add skill and stuff like that. The user interface, I think, is worth just reminding ourselves about, because how the SDK builds something is determined by the user interface. So when you have your Superhuman Go up and running, you have over in the corner of your screen, I think you can see there's the little Barbie doll that pops up. And when you click on that, you're now into the Superhuman Go user interface. And the key thing is that all the agents that I've loaded appear down the side, and I can go and find more agents by clicking here. And so eventually any agents we build will appear either in this list or in some sort of a gallery that allows people to select the agent that they're looking for. So 40 million people who know nothing about me and how brilliant I am will suddenly start to see my stuff coming up here. And, you know, maybe some of them will buy it and I can retire. Although I tried that and it didn't work. But, you know, and you mentioned the Gmail. So when you bring up one of these, like the Gmail one, you get to do a sign in, and then you have to go off and get your account connected and so on. But the key thing is that once this agent is up and running, okay, I'm obviously in a different account to what I was before. Once it's up and running, it has access to everything that is in the window that the user is using. So it can see your screen, it can see what code you've, or what text you've selected and stuff like that. The way it's broken down on the SDK is, I think, into these different areas. What they're calling agents, we've always called them packs. So it looks like a pack, and it just has some extra features on it. So can people read that, or do I need to magnify more?
No,
I don't
absolutely.
want you to...
Works great.
Okay, you don't need to read the code. Okay, so when you build an agent, you're essentially creating a new pack. So you have your pack header with all the usual stuff, your imports, your export statements, your authentications, your domain. New item is you build skills, which are basically driven by prompts rather than code. You can pick one of the skills as your entry point to give a hint to the system that this is where I want you to start. But basically, it'll pick the skills and the tools based upon the context. The AI is now going to make sometimes fairly non-deterministic decisions, but it's definitely going to do its best to figure out what is the user trying to do, and let me see if I can help. It reminds me of good old Clippy, who used to come up and say, "You seem to be writing a ransom note. Can I help you do that better?" Anyway, and then you have tools, but actually they're not new. They're just formulas, right? All the formulas in your pack are actually become tools. The knowledge base is new, and that is actually sync tables. So if you build sync tables, you can turn them into your knowledge base. So let's look at the new item, which is skills. You have a skill header, which has a name, a display name, which is how it appears in the user interface, and a description. And you're going to see these descriptions becoming very important, because the description, the name and the description, is how the AI figures out what to do. So you're going to be describing this not for some user who's going to just click past it. You're going to have to describe things very well. And it's a bit like what we're experiencing with MCP. The better you describe what the pack is going to do or what the skill is going to do, the better the AI will be at selecting it and making it happen. Inside your skill, you have a prompt which defines the behavior. It is going to determine which tools get used, which screen text is going to be used, Any replacements you're going to make to the user's text on their screen is going to be explained in here. What knowledge is going to be needed from the knowledge base, what knowledge is going to be changed. You describe all of that inside your prompt. So you're going to be really good at prompt engineering from this point onwards, because that's how you're going to drive your skills. The tools, you make a list of tools. So here we are, I'm describing a new skill. I give it a name and a description. It has a prompt. I'll come back to that later. And I have a list of tools. And I'm saying use all the tools that are in this pack, but also use the screen annotation tool, which is the tool that looks at the user screen. And by the way, I'm saying I'm going to do some rewrites. So I'm saying not just reading the screen, but actually being able to do some rewrites. Now, when this is up and running, it has a different context to what we're used to. Normally, a pack has almost no context at all. It runs on a server. It can't see your tables. It can't see your document. It can only see the parameters you pass it. And basically, that's it. Now, it can use an API and so on. However, these new packs that are agents have access to the screen text, the fields that you're in if you're editing an input field, and any text that you've selected. And it will only show you the text. It doesn't see any of the graphic. Well, it doesn't pass over to you anything else other than the plain text from within that context. And you can't see or access any of these from your code in the pack. You will access them all from your prompt. So here this prompt is saying, look for text that looks like this, dollars, or a number followed by CAD. In the user's writing, and use the exchange rate tool to convert this to another currency and create a suggestion using the rewrite tool to replace the placeholder with the value. This is straight out of Eric's example. And I think the documentation is very good because it's led with examples, which makes it a lot easier. So here's a prompt in English. We're now programming in English, and we're telling the agent what to do through a prompt that's inside a skill. And you can have several skills inside the pack so that there's all kinds of situations that the user can get into, and a different skill with a different prompt will be triggered by the AI to deal with each one. But you also have access to the user. So you know the user's name, you'll know their email address, and there's a rough timestamp to the nearest minute. You also have access to the chat history, which is a history of exchanges where you'll see the prompts and the AI responses. But again, only from within your prompt, not within your JavaScript code. When you're writing a tool, as I said, basically you're building a formula. So you have the usual formula header, name, description, whether it's an action or not, and what the return type is. But the name and description needs to be good enough to help an AI figure out, do I need this tool? Am I going to use this tool? Do I use this tool here? What do I pass to this tool? What am I going to get back from the tool? It needs to have a very clear idea of all of that, so it makes a good choice to use the tools. You'll have a list of parameters, again, name and description. The description is important. The AI is going to have to figure out what am I passing over to the tool, and it'll do a better job if your description is spot on. What is the type of the parameter? And then you execute your JavaScript code or your TypeScript code. You have all your usual access to API calls to read data, to write data to other systems, and then you'll return a value. And that value is going to end up in the context of the user's screen, or it'll be used within the prompt to make the prompt do something in the next step. So it's all fairly straightforward code that we've all been used to seeing. There's nothing new, nothing magical. We're just going to have to be a little bit more careful about our descriptions, and we get to do all the usual API stuff that we're used to doing. You know, and you know, it's fairly straightforward if you've been building packs in the past. But what's new, and I think this is a wonderful piece of engineering, how do you get RAG knowledge bases into something as simple as a pack? I really didn't know how they were going to do it, and what they've decided to do is to use sync tables. So your knowledge bases are implemented using the sync table capability. So first of all, you have to create a schema where you define what the columns are, the names of them and what type. And then there are special columns that turn it into a RAG database. It'll be vectorized into a vector database. So here you have your normal schema that you would use when you're setting up a sync table with different columns, the types, the hints. You can do all the usual stuff. Here's a type that is the priority. It's got a hint type, which is select list. It's got options. So you've got all of those capabilities. But what makes it into a knowledge base is the fact that I'm describing these extra special fields, the display property, the ID property, the featured properties, the title property, the link property, and here's how you're going to index it. So these special properties are going to form the chunk that goes to the vectorizing, tokenizing process. And those chunks are going to go into the vector database so that when the AI needs information, it's going to do a semantic search for the data that's been presented here, not a lexical search. Is going to match the meanings of what's in your knowledge base with whatever it thinks it needs in the context of what it's trying to do within your prompt. And so this is how you create your knowledge base. Without having to go to an external Pinecone vector database or anything like that. So you have your sync tables, and then you're going to have RAG tools, which are essentially formulas that do the RAG, the retrieval and the updating. So for example, to create the knowledge sync table, you're going to have the usual pack add sync table, which you would do for an ordinary sync table, and then the code that builds your sync table. And in this case, it's going out to an external API endpoint to get the data. And here's an interesting one, a RAG tool that is able to update the knowledge. So we're able to add a task to our task database by following the code that you would normally use to add something in there. But now that's part of the knowledge base. And I love this. This means that agents can learn. As a result of what they do, you can prompt them to say, at the end of this, make sure we update the knowledge base with whatever new data we've gathered as a part of this. And so I think our agents can start to learn as they go and know more and more about what the user is doing and what they want. So that in a very short summary is what we have found inside the SDK. And I have to say, I'm very impressed, very excited. The one thing I will say is that this is aimed at personal productivity. The context is a single user on a single window doing single things for themselves. So I'm still waiting to see how we're going to apply this to corporate level stuff or to small to medium enterprises running automated SOPs, which is the kind of agent work I've been doing in the past. But my goodness, this is very exciting, and I'm very impressed. So I'll shut up now and let people have their questions.
Wow, Max, I'm super impressed. You've given us you condensed all of our learnings into 10 minutes. Thank you so much. What a privilege to have listened to that. Eric, I would like to, oh, Doug, you want to say something? You're on mute, Doug.
I usually should be muted. Looking at what Max did is fascinating. It sort of harkens me back to primary and secondary keys in Sybase and Oracle and such things, as compared to Quadrant and Pinecone. Am I right in that?
To a certain extent, you are able to suggest how things are indexed. You're able to suggest how things are filtered, but it isn't a relational database, so you kind of have to put some of that out of your head. But anyway, Eric, I'm interested if you have any.
It's Coda's system. It's not somebody else's.
Yeah, I'm sure they're probably basing it on somebody else's technology. But anyway, Eric, I'm really keen to see if you have any erratum or addendum to what I've said, because you're the expert.
It was a great overview. I think you touched on, yeah, pretty much anything I would have touched on as well. There's always endless bits of detail that I could probably dive into, but maybe one that just stood out at the end was you're talking about chaining together the RAG data that you have indexed with a sync table with actions. Today, the one gap we have is that our indexing pipeline that puts it into RAG only runs in a scheduled manner. There's no ability to directly insert into it or to have it update to a live data change. It's just like sync tables today, for sync tables sync on a basis, right? They don't have webhooks and they can't be directly pushed into. So we still have that limitation. I think I've called it out to our team. I think it's going to be more of an issue perhaps now than it even was with sync tables, that if someone says, go update the title of this ticket, and then in the next chat, they say, what's the title of that ticket? And it's giving them the old index value, that's going to come across as a little janky. So I think it's something that we're going to look to solve. And there's been some initial kind of exploration around incorporating webhooks where no matter how the data changes somewhere else, when it changes, pushing that data, back into the RAG database so that it can get the latest and greatest. But that hasn't been sorted out just yet.
The tokenizing is expensive and can take a while. So I think I can live with the fact that it's a scheduled, regular thing. And I think I can imagine some sort of logic that would enable you to have recent changes in one place and the so I'm sure we'll find a way to live with it. But yeah, sorry about that. I hadn't actually realized. I really did think that because there is example code showing the tasks being updated. So I thought, so, okay, I'll tone that down a bit.
So the one pattern that we've done a little bit of, I think that kind of can work around it for now, is that another limitation of the indexed knowledge, the knowledge layer, as I call it in the docs, is that when you get back a result from the knowledge layer, it's not the full table row that you indexed. It's like a piece of it. And that means that sometimes in order to answer the user's question, you have to use that piece to then look up the full details. And so one of the patterns that I think I illustrated in that example is you get back a URL to a task that's matched when you do a search over the knowledge layer. You then use that URL to call a formula, which loads not only the full contents of that task, but also the fully up-to-date contents. So even though what we have indexed is out of date, you're not basing your logic off of the index data. You're just using it to find a relevant thing. And then once you find it, you use a formula to live load the full set of information about that resource. And then if you push updates, that's fine. Next time you go ask a question about it, as long as the keywords you use haven't changed, it'll still come up, and then you'll still know the live information, and that live information will reflect that change you made a minute ago. So there's like some patterns
to answer
there.
Christian's question that he put there about can you access the tables and the docs, I think you're limited to just using the Coda API for now to be able to get at anything that isn't sent to you as a parameter.
Yeah, it's an important thing to call out, which is to say, although the foundation is Coda PAX, a Superhuman Go agent has no direct ability to interface with Coda, the content in Coda, to manipulate Coda docs or anything like that. It's currently a shared technological platform, but not a shared like data platform. So there's some work where something we have started to build out but haven't launched is the ability for an agent to utilize the index data from other agents. So what you could imagine that as is, let's say you have the super duper calendar agent, and it's just really good at doing normal calendar things, and you've done a whole bunch of good prompts or whatever it is to like make calendaring better, but you don't want to have to redo all the work of the Google Calendar agent and how it just raw connects and pulls in data. What we want to have enabled in the future is that you could build the super duper calendar agent, which itself maybe doesn't do any indexing, but then connects to the index data or connects to the tools of other agents and kind of lives on top of them. So in the same way that a single doc can integrate multiple packs, we have a view where there's like a single agent that could then connect to the data and tools of other agents. That all requires a permissioning system we haven't built yet, and so that's why it's not live. But we want to get to the point where that's the case.
And you talk about the persistence of the knowledge base, because it'd be very important to know whether you still have the same knowledge there every time the user logs on and reruns the agent from one time to the next.
Yeah, so when you set up that agent the first time, you configure if there are sync tables, what tables to have indexed. It indexes those and keeps them up to date on a regular basis, and it's there every time you open the agent. So like every night, it'll go to your Google Calendar and scrape in the latest set of events that you have. And then every time you talk to that agent, there's a persistent database there of your data.
Yeah, and I think the verb you're using is crawling. You crawl the data. Is that what that's about?
A bit, yeah. So crawling is
okay.
is a niche topic, but it's essentially that, I don't know if you've seen this before for some packs you've worked on, but sometimes just the way an API or project is structured is that, let's say you have an API for tasks, right? And there's projects and there's tasks. And the way that it works is that you can only list out the tasks for one specific project. You can't say, list out all the tasks that I have across all my projects. In that case, you may have built a sync table that had as a required parameter a project ID, right? And so when someone drags it in, the first thing they have to answer is what project ID. That works well in a docs use case where you're probably focused in a doc on a single kind of project, and that's something the user can type in. But when you're trying to index kind of all of your data because the agent doesn't know what use case it's about to solve, that doesn't work well. How do you just fill in each individual, ID one at a time? So the crawling is more that if you had a projects table that listed your projects, now we know all the project IDs you have. We could then rerun the tasks table over and over again for each of those projects. And so crawling just sets up a linkage between two tables so that one table can power the indexing of another table.
Okay, I got it wrong. It's not what I thought it was. Thanks for the clarity. Okay.
Yeah, and some of these names are confusing, and we spent a lot of time arguing about the names, but it didn't quite work out perfectly, I guess.
What I would love to know, Eric, and I understand Superhuman Go does not have any preferential access to my Coda docs, does not understand what lives inside my Coda docs. I understand I define the knowledge base by defining a sync table within the agent, so within the pack. What I would like to know, is there any consideration of being able to, at some point in the future, instead of building up a sync table that the user cannot access because it lives within the code of the agent that the user can't see, that we would give the user the ability to say, so you can have a Coda doc, you can have a table that's called projects, and now you can connect that certain table using the table ID, whatever, inside the pack. So the pack knows this is the table we use, and the user themselves can always go back to a specific Coda doc, open it up, and see the same knowledge base that the agent queries upon. Is that something that's a consideration?
I guess I forgot to tie back the thing I said before about sharing knowledge between agents. I think one of the ideas would be that eventually maybe all of your Coda content would be a knowledge source that's just built in, and that an agent can say, I want to connect to all of the users' Coda content and do stuff with it. So that's kind of where that was going, and I forgot to tie it back. I think to your question, there's a kind of a broader framing that's maybe useful, which is that there are different kinds of agents. Agents, that word, as you know, is used everywhere to mean everything. And so I think we in some of our pitch decks, we talk about it, but I think the way you can think about it is there are some agents that are fully there to replace human, right? They run in the background, mostly unsupervised, starting when they need to start, doing work, and then finishing their work all on their own, right? That is not the kind of agents that you would build in Superhuman Go. Superhuman Go is much more about empowering the person at the keyboard, but there's always that person at the keyboard doing the work. It's just the agents are kind of coming in and providing assistance. So that's just one distinction. But I think another distinction is there are some tools where users are crafting agents personally for their own needs, which is to say, like, I'm building an agent that says, look at this one table that I made and then do this one specific thing that I want to have done with it, right? They're bespoke. They're like individual Zaps and Zapier, right? They're like your own brain turned into some sort of pattern. The agents we have in Superhuman Go are more like apps on your phone. They're more where the developer says, this is a plug and play, install and use and just go deliverable. You have to do some connection setup, but you don't have to like craft a flow. Like you open Zapier on day one, it does nothing for you, right? You open the calendar agent on day one, it like does stuff for you. So I think the world you're talking about where like a user would pick specific data and build an agent off of it is a bit of a different thing than what our agent platform does today. There's been talks about also allowing that to be a thing that Superhuman Go supports, which is to say like bespoke user created agents, not off the shelf click and install agents. But as it sits today, I think we wouldn't build that specific table scenario into a install and go agent because it doesn't really make sense. I feel like that specific table scenario makes more sense when you're doing like these more bespoke, per user agents.
Got it. that answers it perfectly and also ties into my next question, which was the sharing of the agent. Right now with a pack, you can publish it, you can share it with individual users. So an agent, do I assume correctly, is publish or don't publish, but there's nothing in between?
We do want to allow for the same paradigms we had in Coda Packs, which is to say, share with just one other person, share with your team, share with your whole company, or publish publicly. Like, we love that kind of concentric circle
Yeah.
view, and we want to get there for agents as well. Right now, we don't support we don't support a lot of things, but we don't support the org, like sharing with individuals or sharing to your org. We haven't quite solved all that yet. I mean, at the very
Yeah.
highest level, Superhuman Go itself is only available for kind of individual accounts right now. We haven't figured out all the admin controls, so we haven't launched it to kind of companies yet. But as we do, then we're going to like work on making it so that you can share to just, you can have, like, let's say, an agent just for your company, an agent just for your team, an agent that only you and your friend. It's like, we want to get to that point, but there's some changes we're doing to our ACL system. I guess, like, zooming out once again, talking a little bit about what agents have access to, which Max touched on. I think what we're realizing is that agents have a lot more access than packs did, right? Packs were used by technical people and only had access to the data explicitly fed into them. Agents are used by much more consumer, non-technical folks, and they have like complete access to everything on your screen. And so given that kind of change of access, I think we're like rethinking some of the policies we had. So before you share a pack with me, it's there in my slash menu. I didn't even have to like accept that share, right? So they're kind of spear phishing attacks that are possible where I create an agent called Google Calendar with the same icon. I then direct share it to you. You don't accept that share. It just shows up in your list. You install it. You end up giving away a whole bunch of stuff you didn't mean to give away to a place you didn't mean to give it away to. So we're kind of moving a little bit more slowly and rethinking some of these kind of the lack of friction that existed kind of turns into a risk when you're now getting into like a less technical audience and a more data being fed into it. So I think that's the reason that some of these things like building for your team or sharing to individuals, we probably won't have in the short term, just because we realize we need to kind of rehaul some of those systems and make them a bit more foolproof.
Fully understood. Doug, please go ahead.
I didn't ask this, Nina and I would be disappointed. Given this agent can do all these things and we have a team, let's say the agent can, I don't know, go into HR records. Can we control which records the agent can see depending on who the user is, which we can't do today? I mean, that gets to be, I mean, in my world, we have documents that some team people are allowed to see, but others aren't. And they're not even supposed to know we have them. And so I'm finding wonderful workarounds to it, thanks to Nina. But I would love to find them within the wonderful world of Coda. And just for this one little bug of mine, there was an interview by Shashir the other day where he was with these two guys or some sort of venture capital guys, and he talked all about Grammarly and Superhuman and the name change and all this stuff. The word Coda came up twice in half an hour, once by one of the interviewers who's a Coda fan. I would really like to hear him talk about Coda a whole lot more. It would make me feel a lot better. Would probably make you feel better too. Max is feeling better already. Probably Christian as well.
Yeah.
Coda is really important, and most people don't understand how important it is, but it's important.
Yes. I'm not on Shashir's prep team, so I won't be able to directly influence that. But I would definitely say that internally, it is very clear to me that Coda remains important. I'm all the time seeing all the work the Coda team is doing. We're bringing on new people. We're launching big new expansive projects. So like, I think also you just have to assume like there's no way Coda dies in the heart of the guy who created Coda. So I feel pretty secure that Coda is going to be a key part of the platform. That said, I think like, when you take over leading Grammarly, you got to talk about Grammarly, and then our newest hot thing is Superhuman Go. So I think that's where maybe some of the words are at, but hopefully the actions don't match the fact that I think Coda is still seen as super important and part of the suite. I mean, to be clear, this is not the vision of let's just buy a bunch of companies and have them sit next to each other. Like the vision that Shashir has is that this is a productivity suite where everything works together. getting that to happen is super hard. They actually pulled off, I don't know if you realized, but you can actually buy Superhuman SKU and you get Mail, Coda, and Grammarly all bundled together. And they created a whole new unified login system that allows all of those to share the same login all in a matter of a few months. So like I've been super impressed of how fast they're moving, but still getting different systems to talk to each other is a pain. Getting it all to look seamless and it works a pain. So I think it'll take some time before all the wrinkles are smoothed out, but I think the vision is to have not Coda live on an island and be just its own separate thing, but to be part of this continuum of how people work with AI and with their data.
Oliver has a question. Just want to make sure we don't
Yes,
skip over that.
we'll go right to Oliver in a second. Last thing I was going to say about your original question around data access. One thing that is different with agents is that in Coda docs, the doc is a shared artifact that has its own sharing capabilities. And so one of the surprising, confusing, good things about Coda docs is that one person syncs in data with a table, someone else who doesn't have access to the data can see the table, right? It's really awesome sometimes if you're trying to save on license seats. It's really bad other times if you're worried about data being get into the wrong hands. With agents, that there is no shared thing that bridges ACLs. When I connect an agent, I connect it with my account, and it can only ever use my account for looking up data or indexing or anything else. There's no ability for it to go into and see someone else's data. So the firewalls are a bit more clear and a bit more maybe what users expect with agents compared to docs where there is this like sharing capability. Oliver, do you want to ask it live or should I just read your chat message? I'll just read your chat message then. Oliver asked, is it possible to foresee how interaction with future AI browsers might look? Is it even technically possible for an AI browser to access a Coda page? I gotta say, I'm not super up to school with the AI browsers. I just saw there's a new one called Strawberry, I think that launched like today or something. OpenAI has its own. How AI browsers would work with Coda, I don't know. Presumably they would because we load stuff in the web page, their web browser, they can read the content of the web page and they can do stuff with it. I think conversely, Superhuman Go, it works by being an extension or by being a desktop app that sees the content on your screen. And so I don't think the world of AI browsers radically changes either what Coda is or what Superhuman Go is, but certainly early days, and I don't know.
Perfect. I would like to take us back in time a little bit. I'm trying to figure out when it was that you spoke to us at a recent Coda Makers meetup. Maybe a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember I loved all of the opinionated perspectives you shared. And one thing, if I just summarize the talk you gave, was that you said packs are not intended to perform as a black box. The idea is for packs to integrate with other services, but all of the logic should remain within the Coda doc so that users can trust what's happening. The idea for the Coda doc is not to act as an app that will necessarily offer you user role permission level, but rather to say a team that trusts each other is working within one doc. And then you said to the topic of the Coda API, you don't foresee any massive resources being pointed that way to improve that. I would love to know, did any of the recent changes change any of those perspectives, or is that still all as true as it was a year ago?
I'm impressed that my words left a lasting impression there.
They did, yeah.
I don't think there's a change to my opinions, at least on docs and packs and the best way to use those. That part stays the same. The last part there about the Coda API, I would say still the answer is probably the same. The only light is that we just, as you probably saw on the community, are doing a big push to build a Coda MCP server, right? We don't want to be left behind. MCP is only gaining steam, it seems like. And so, MCP is just one form of delivering API functionality. It's a form that was built and optimized for LLMs to consume. But at the end of the day, it's a bunch of like operations with parameters that return data in a certain format. And so the team that's working on that MCP server, one of the core questions they asked early on was, should we build directly on top of our external API, or should we build alongside our external API? And they decided, for expedience's sake, to build alongside the API. So the MCP server can have, well, I guess alongside, that's not a win in my view. It means it's built in parallel. It's a separate thing from the REST API. So what that means is that they could move faster, and they could change things, but it means that they can add new functionality to the MCP server that they don't add to the REST APIs. I'm hopeful that if you do the work to add, let's say, like one of the things that I know it's a top request that I track all the requests for the API, is the ability to like read and write to comments in a Coda doc, right? I think it's been a request forever. It's super useful. I can totally see how that'd be great for workflows. If they add that to the MCP server, they probably need to solve 80% of the problems, which is figure out like where the data lives and how to represent it that's reasonable, and rate limits and the rest of it. If they do that 80% of the work for MCP, I think it's only 20% more to then kind of add it to the REST API as well. So I'm optimistic that MCP will push forward the overall extensibility of Coda, even if it doesn't directly make it into the REST API. Then there's a future open question of, are REST APIs even as important in the world of LLMs and AI, or we just MCP and kind of like have will we ever hard code individual method calls in the future, or will we always just say, hey, LLM, figure it out for me? And I still think there's a world for REST APIs. I still think they have use. So I'm a champion for eventually bringing some of that functionality over to the REST API. So that's my only asterisk. It's not a guarantee. It hasn't been funded. The real push is to get an MCP out the door and have it there for users. But I think it will at least lower the barrier to entry to then building out REST API endpoints for some of those things people have been asking for.
And I do remember that on that community post by the person driving the MPC server beta, I think Bharat is his name. Yeah. He did specify clearly that creating a tables is a function they want to expose, which is obviously not a function that's within the current API.
Yes. They're definitely like, one of the things that's unfortunate is that the current REST API is 100% just an artifact of what has been the most burning ask, not let's sit down, analyze everything that Coda has and can do, and then figure out a way to represent it, right? And so it's grown very organically with new endpoints coming about when there was a high enough demand to when you're a startup, it's all about prioritization. It's about what you don't do as much as what you do. So I understand that, but as someone like who has to support people using the API, I would have loved if it was like, let's soup to nuts, just like build out every endpoint we could dream of. So I think if anything, this MCP effort is making people internally realize, oh, we actually have a bunch of useful stuff that people would want to do in an automated way. Let's go ahead and like figure that out.
Love it. Are there any plans for having a Coda Superhuman Go agent to bridge that gap of
Yes.
Superhuman Go not being able to read Coda data?
I think so, yes. So already internally, they've prototyped using the MCP server they've built to create a Superhuman Go agent. Now, we don't have built-in support for MCP in Superhuman Go today, but I created like a rough prototype that they've been using, and there's some work undergoing to like explore how we would build first-class support for MCP in Superhuman Go agents. But yes, they've been using that internally to test out the MCP, and people have found it super useful. You can just type to it, hey, can you spin me up a doc with 7 tables, tracking this and that, and it'll just like off it goes. So yeah, I think we are likely to see a Coda Superhuman agent in the future, but the timeline for that I'm not sure of.
Got it.
I just want to vote for that. There is no Coda logo anywhere in the Superhuman Go user interface.
Yeah.
And that seems to me like a bit of a boo-boo when you're launching in this way. Even if all it did was connect me with one of my documents, so at least I can get over into Superhuman, just pop up the URL of one of my documents, and when I click on it, I'm in there. Cheat, but get it in, please, because it needs to be there.
Yes, yeah. I think, the lens that I think this team has been viewing Superhuman Go at is there are like millions of active Grammarly users. How can we reach them and get to them? And the overlap between them and Coda users is I don't think was initially so significant that it was a must-have feature. But I think for us to be a suite that all makes sense together, Superhuman Mail, Coda, everything should be kind of like I said, that those barriers should be removed. And so I think that's one that I'm seeing the internal work already. I'm pretty optimistic will be out there soon. But yeah, it wasn't a great look if you're a Coda fan looking for your orange logo in the sidebar.
Yeah, and I see Mel's message on the chat saying it's a bit ironic when there's an Airtable agent. And my read on the situation is that in an obvious effort to have several agents populate the marketplace upon its launch, it seems to me that the proliferate PAX building work that Leandro has done, which includes, for example, the Airtable pack, the QuickBooks pack, the Mermaid pack, has been converted into agents, which I think explains why is there an Airtable agent and not a Coda agent.
Yeah, the approach we took there is that one other asterisk is that today, the whole marketplace aspect that exists for Coda packs, where you charge per maker, you don't have any billing today for Superhuman agents. Obviously, if you're a paid service, you can just charge for your service elsewhere, but that like ability to buy within the agent store doesn't exist. We're going to be building it, but that takes more time. Because of that, we didn't want to invite people in to turn their packs into agents if those were paid packs, because then there would be no way to monetize them as agents. So who we looked to originally were people that had packs that were included in bundles, existing Coda paid bundles. So we already had an agreement with them where we like had paid them a certain amount per year in order to bundle it into our plans. And we said, let's focus on those because then there's not really a lost revenue aspect. And so that's why I think you see those set of agents over there. Those are all bundled agents that we already had terms with developers on. And so that's the subset that we focused on for launch.
Love it.
Leandro was supposed to be joining us, but unfortunately something has come up and he hasn't been able to, because we were hoping to get his experience of building these agents. But
yeah, I'm giving you the rosy picture. He might be able to give you more of the raw feedback.
I have a couple more questions. The one domain requirements of PAX, will that continue to exist?
It still does today. I think it's a question about whether it will continue to. I don't know. I think the one domain, it's funny because the first barrier you always hit is the one domain. But every time I then grant someone a second domain, they're like, wait, now how do I auth against both those domains? And you can't, right? You can only have one form of user auth. It can only be one set of settings. So it's kind of more like, do we end up extending PAX to somehow support multiple auths and multiple URLs? I think that's a big infrastructure change. And I think given our other vision of agents being able to use the tools and index knowledge of other agents, I think there's a world in which we don't have to build it, which is to say, maybe you install 4 agents for 4 of the key SaaS apps you use, and then you install 3 more agents that each kind of use pieces of those to do their job. So it's not about having one mega agent which directly connects to all these different services, but rather you have internally, sometimes we call these L0 and L1 agents, but you have L0 agents, which are just there to bring all the data in, right? And then you have these agents that sit on top of them that kind of do interesting things by mixing and matching the data around. So that's kind of like the way we've been thinking about it, but I don't think that's like set in stone by any means. And it may be that we change or relax some of these rules, but I just think technologically, the like one pack has one set of auth is like really assumed in a lot of infrastructure. So it'd be a huge rewrite to kind of change that.
And just to clarify, the idea of L1 sitting atop of L0s, that data that they're pulling in, that is not meant to be visible, whether it's within a Coda doc, within a specific Coda table. That works under the hood. The user is not expected to be able to open up a table and look at that table directly and interact with it.
That's a great question. Yeah. So when an agent indexes data in a sync table, it is just there for the agent to be able to like have it in its memory. It is not there to be, today at least, kind of directly browsable by the user or to build things off of it. Now, if that agent is also published as a pack in the Coda Packs gallery, that same sync table could do that in a Coda doc. And so part of what the initial agents we've launched, when we worked with a lot of new partners that had never built in Coda before. And so when we worked with like Fireflies, for instance, like we kind of like said, let's just make an agent. But there's nothing stopping Fireflies from adding more stuff to their agent, and then also publishing it as a Coda pack where you could then, directly use this in tables or directly call the actions, right? So I think our future world is one where we would like, if possible, that like, yeah, every agent, you could either use it in an automated fashion where you just type to it and it goes, or if you want to like manually fiddle with the bits, you drag it into your Coda doc and you start using, sync tables, you start using action formulas, etc. So, but no, I think if you're just installing it as an agent in Superhuman Go, there's no kind of interface for kind of browsing the data or looking around.
Got it. Understood. Perfect. Does anybody have any other questions? Because I've got a bunch of them, but I want to give you all a chance to speak up.
These are great questions.
Yeah, if I may, Eric,
Daniel.
thank you for bringing all of this, for the work, and congratulations on the merger and the backstage work that it takes to make it work for everybody, not just for us Coda lovers. So I'm reading a movement where Coda is less enterprise focused and more end user focused, especially to be able to grow and also achieve Grammarly's current public. And it seems that agents not being able to be reading my own data and not being able to craft that scenario that it's only useful for me, maybe my team, and maybe my company. It creates a store or a gallery where all agents need to work for everybody, or they really won't work. Am I wrong in that reading? How do you understand this?
It reflects the current state, which is today, like we're
Yeah.
thinking of there's a store full of agents for brand name SaaS apps that people know and love, right? That's like the initial what we launched with. And I think like we're talking to more partners right now, and they're partners for big SaaS apps, and we want to get their icon to show up in the store and the agent bench as well. As far as like the enterprise DNA, I think it's been a really interesting part of the Grammarly plus Coda merger is that Grammarly has really strong consumer roots and grew into enterprise, and Coda has really strong enterprise roots with limited success in students and individuals, and so it's very much a yin yang situation. And I don't think by any means enterprise is off the table. And if anything, I think there's a lot of talk about how we get to being able to do agents for companies and agents for enterprise. It's just we know from experience that the level of like diligence for enterprise is through the roof, right? You need to have admin controls, you need to have audit logging, you need to have data portability, you need to have identity data protection. Like there's a million things you need to have in order for an enterprise to sign off on something, not to mention like what AI models do you use and can it only be used in certain geographies, like just knowing all of that. And what's good is that actually Grammarly, although they started with a consumer root, they actually had a bunch of that that they had built out too. So like there is Grammarly for enterprise. They built out features specifically for that. And so I think it's going to take longer. And the way I saw it is that Grammarly and Coda merge in January. Like you want to show something for it by the end of the year, right? Obviously no one was happy, myself included, with how long it took for Brain to kind of go from something we talked about to something you could use, which is still like to be clear, Brain is actually not going to be a standalone product anymore. We reused its guts to build the indexing pipeline and agents, but it's not fun. And so I think the way we saw it is that we want to have something to talk about, something to show for our work before the end of the year, but you couldn't get a fully enterprise ready product in that short amount of time frame. And so the initial launch was consumer focused, where we do have a lot of opportunity with our existing Grammarly user base, but just knowing that we're going slower on enterprise because we have to be more careful, but not that it's off the map.
Perfect. Thank you.
Fully understood. Can you give us, as a wrap up, any timeline expectation on when the SDK will be open up to more pack developers?
Yeah. So right now there's still a lot that's manual, like I'm manually flipping things in config files for people. And the whole, I guess also like when we're zooming out thing is that, this idea of taking everything more slow when it comes to agents versus packs. That also includes our publishing criteria. So we were almost uniquely lenient in what it took to publish on our store. You just hit one button. We didn't have to know who you were. We didn't have to review a single thing you wrote, right? That's pretty rare in the world of publishing. Like I was involved in us publishing our Miro app, our Coda Miro app, right? There's a whole process for that. We got listed on the ServiceNow store at one point, and that's a gigantic process, right? So we had a zero process publishing. I think for agents, we're actually going to switch to more of a review process. You have people. One of Grammarly's value props is that it's responsible AI, right? It's doing it in a way that's like you're not going to have a parasocial relationship with your AI agent and like call it your girlfriend. Like we're doing things to make sure that the way we deliver AI is responsible and business focused. And so because of that, there's a lot of teams that have been like triple checking everything Grammarly did, even when Grammarly authored every line of code. Now that we're inviting others in, they're going to be part of that process of making sure that every new agent that we launch is also being responsible with users' data, is being responsible with AI. And so there's going to be a higher bar to get something launched in the store. And that process itself is like brand new and like being created right now. So I think there's like some things that have to be sorted out. What I've heard is that we're targeting like a, late Q1 maybe for allowing anyone to build an agent and not have this kind of closed beta. That said, I think that's like highly sketched in pencil, not in stone. So I wouldn't take that too strong to heart. But I think that's what we'd like to see is like in Q1 we can open it up and say anyone can start at least building locally and testing locally, and then maybe getting to the store. There's still like more process we have to sort out there, or it takes a little longer. But that's where we're getting at. The other thing is I do have a change out right now that show you a preview of. It's being reviewed, but there's going to be a new page that I'm adding to the docs called upgrading an existing pack to an agent. And it's going to specifically talk about some of the like things you can do and abilities you have to like better transform an existing pack into an agent. And so like, there's these new fields that we've added that we can give specific instructions to the LLM on an existing formula in addition to like just reading the standard description. And so anyway, this is going to be hitting, hopefully this week. But anyway, certainly we are super interested and want to bring a lot of our existing packs and pack makers with us on this journey to the agent store. So it's a priority. It's just we've got a lot to sort out there.
Absolutely. Fully understood. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so we're going to wrap here. Eric, I cannot thank you enough for taking an hour out of your busy day to speak with us, to share from the heart, to share your perspectives, to let us know we're not forgotten on this new Superhuman train, but that the Coda pack makers will be taking along for the joyride. I, for one, am super excited about it all. Max, thank you so much for sharing your learnings with us. Wonderful community support as always. And everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm sure we'll be in touch again virtually soon. And Eric, again, thank you so much and congratulations to you and the team on the successful launch.
Thank you for hosting me. These are always a joy.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.